Welcome to session number 4 of Genesis in Depth. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined by my friends in Italy, the Philippines, and various places around the U.S. and around the world. This is available on a live stream. If you'd like to be in on that, just contact me and we'll make sure you get a link. Or you can pick it up on Facebook or YouTube. We've been going on now for several years, and this is our opportunity to have just a bit of fellowship with one another and to share the ministry worldwide. So we've been in Genesis now for this will be the first month of Genesis, and just 1 hour or so a week, and it will take us a while to work through Genesis. This is a very basic book in the sense that it lays the foundations for everything else. We've been working through the first chapter of Genesis verse by verse with a view toward understanding exactly what happened and why it's important. And this is not always obvious. So we're going to walk our way through it. Some of this is pretty straightforward, but we're going to walk through it. Let's move over to the PowerPoint presentation. Let's see if I can find this for us. And that should be coming up. There we go. Okay, as we're in chapter 1 of Genesis, we've gone through the 6 days of creation. The first 3 days, God provided the form of the heavens and the earth. And the focus is primarily upon the earth. From verse 2 of Genesis 1, literally until the end of the Bible, the focus of the book of Genesis really is on the focus of the Bible is upon things on earth. If there is anything of significance in the rest of the universe, from a theological point of view, God's message is it doesn't matter. So people who wonder, well, what if there are extraterrestrials living, on the planets of Alpha Centauri? How do they get saved? The simple answer is that that's God's problem. The more complex answer, I think, is that uh, God has gone out of his way to tell us everything that we need to know. And if there were, in fact, civilizations on other planets, and that was an important thing for us to know, God would see to it that we knew. And I actually think it would be in the Bible. The fact that it's not tells me either that there's a quarantine to keep sin from going to the rest of the universe, or that there just isn't anybody out there. The Bible seems to speak of the heavens in particular as this vast and beautiful array of objects, complex nature that are put in place merely for signs and for seasons and for light during the night. Uh, there may be more than that, but we're certainly not going to discover that without God's help. And to start out by denying the existence of God and trying to imagine how all of this evolved is going to get scientists absolutely nowhere. So anyway, that's kind of beside the point, but it gives you an idea where I'm coming from. This first chapter lays out a kind of a framework for everything. So the first 3 days, the form of the earth. The earth was formless, and so God formed it. And in those 3 days, we see a division between the sky and the earth with the waters between. We see the invention of light, of power for the universe, which comes directly from God. Uh, we see the birds in the air and the fish in the sea. Then we see on the third day the appearance of dry land, the most catastrophic movement of the Earth's surface that has ever happened. A great deal of what is true about the surface of the Earth was put into place on that third day. The location of the initial continental uh, area, the the initial mountains, all of this was put into place on that third day. And then mammals, animals that live on dry land, along with creepy crawlies and insects and miscellaneous other things. And also, interestingly enough, the birds were finally given a place to land. They'd been created on the fifth day. Uh, so they spent a day not having a good place to land. Maybe God had some floating things. Who knows? But at any rate, by the sixth day, we've got the creation of land animals. Then at the climax of that creation process, uh, which God could have done with the blink of an eye, he could have just waved his hand or simply spoken, simply willed everything into being. He didn't need 6 days, but he's taken these 6 days for a purpose. And now, here on the sixth day, God creates man. And I'm going to begin at verse 26 of Genesis 1. Then God said, Vayomer Elohim, again, the simple word of a statement is not even the command yet. And God didn't shout, he didn't wave his arms, he just said. And God said, let us, with what we call the optative. This is not even the announcement of command. Let there, make man in our, no. Let us make the man in our image. And the word man there is a reference to all of humankind, mankind. Uh, when we say men, and ladies, don't be upset by this, but when in English we use the word man, and for that matter, when in Hebrew we use the word Adam, we're speaking of all of mankind, humankind, male and female. He created them. Okay, so that maleness and femaleness are the two components of humanity. God created man with a capital M, male and female with a small m and a small f. Uh, and this is actually fairly important in what we're going to get into in this little passage of Genesis is a revolutionary, probably reactionary, most likely insurrectionist, uh, in that what I'm going to teach you today has been taught in the Bible for the better part of 4,000 years and has always reflected reality. But for approximately the past 2 years, the new orthodoxy amongst leftists in the West is that there are multiple genders. You can even get a PhD in gender studies for hundreds of thousands of dollars in some big universities. And the whole thing is made up. The whole thing is really, really silly. Um, And we're going to get that here. I'm going to walk through that a little bit later in this very spot. So God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So the first line here, this first verse, says that man, unlike the other creatures, is to be made in the image of God and according to God's likeness. The term "our" there is deliberate in English. The Hebrew is a plural. We take this as the some call this the plural of majesty. It's very much like the word that we translate God, which is Elohim, a plural. And in some places where it's talking about the idols, that very word is translated the gods of the pagans, the idols. Although usually there's a different word that stands for the images that are made. So God said, "Let us make man in our image." Later on, we're going to be told, "You shall not make any graven images of created things or heavenly bodies or the rest, and worship those. Don't be worshiping idols." In other words, and the real problem with idolatry is not that you're bowing down to a wooden statue so much as you're avoiding the responsibility of being the image of God. God said, "Let us make man," a better translation would be, "as our image." Man was to be the king of the earth and a direct representative of God on the earth. The likeness of God is usually understood as a physical likeness, uh, and that would come from God's knowledge in eternity past of what Jesus would be built like. Just in general, what kind of shape, two legs, two arms, a head on top, that sort of thing. Uh, and so Adam, made in the likeness of God, would have the same general physical shape as Jesus does. But the more important aspect of it is this image of God. Man is designed to reflect and even to contain the uh, transitive attributes and the spiritual character of God Himself. So man is a thinking being. He has a mind that is capable of creative thought. He can logically argue from evidence to a sound conclusion. This is something that dogs and cats and other kinds of creatures can't do. Uh, Carrots and cantaloupes and whatnot don't reason through. Fish and birds don't think about how things are and look for ways to make them better. This is something that only man can do. Man is the problem solver. Man is the creative nurturer. Man is uh, uh, the uh, the triumph of creation, the summit of the creative process. Now, mankind is the last of the created things. Man is not brought to the earth and made there on the earth until all of the rest is in place for him. So the image of God is God's glory, his visible attributes reflected in mankind. The attributes that man can reflect or can have some part of are called transferable. There are non transferable attributes of God, things that man can't share in, like eternality, for example, or aseity, which is uh, the ability to exist without a creator. Man has to have a creator. There are no two ways about that. So there are some things that man cannot reflect, but others that he can. In some research I did years ago, I divided the transferable attributes of God up into four four poles, kind of a T-shaped, well, X-shaped, but straight up and down and left and right, like an XY chart. Uh, and so there could be four poles of emotion, power, faithfulness, and truth, and one characteristic in each direction. And it's actually possible to measure those in people. So if you're doing an assessment of the personality of somebody, you can speak of their motivations and their normal way of solving problems on an emotional, a power-based, a faithfulness-based, or a truth-based level. And most people have combinations of all four. And the pattern that produces will resolve into the personality styles that are described in Romans chapter 12, which is interesting. There are seven of those, and we can see how this four-poled personality diagram of the attributes of God resolves itself into at least seven different kinds of personality with some combinations which make it more complicated. But every human being is different, and that unique personality is not just raw chance, but is rather a unique reflection of the character of God Himself. When we fall from grace, when we sin, when we fall short of the glory of God and sin, we are marring that image within ourselves. This is what Adam did in the garden. When Adam sinned, he marred or shattered even the image of God so that it's not quite the same as it was. The addition of sin to the equation makes man's personality more complex and requires a revolutionary solution. Jesus was sent into the world to heal the shattering of the image of God in man. Now, the likeness of God stays the same. Sinful men and redeemed men look the same. Two legs, two arms, a pair of eyes, and so on. Life forms, if they existed in other solar systems, wouldn't necessarily have the same shape. Uh, or maybe they would. Maybe they would have to if God created them to look like Jesus. Hard to know. I think it's a hypothetical. We don't really need to know. So man's ability to think and to have a relationship to God and to exhibit the personality traits that reflect the character of God are the image of God. Uh, not merely the physical shape of a man. The most important part of the image of God is the spiritual component. In uh, the rest of this, let them, man, spoken of in the plural, let them rule over the fish of the sea. So fishing is okay. Taking a boat out into the ocean and catching fish for dinner is perfectly all right. We have the authority to go catch fish for dinner. Let them rule over the birds of the sky. If I decide to capture and train some pigeons to carry mail for me, that's perfectly okay. I'm not supposed to torture them, but I can certainly use them for productive purposes if I choose, because that's the calling of mankind. Let them rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, over the cattle, over all the earth, over all the earth. Earth is not our mother. Earth is an object God made for man to live on, to have dominion over, and to glorify God with. The earth is not supreme. Man was not made for the earth, but the earth was made for man. And it's a very, very important distinction. The modern environmentalists would like us to believe that we human beings are parasites on the earth. We don't belong here. And we need to be really, really careful that we don't ruin the place. Um, and I think we need to be careful that we don't ruin the place because it is God's creation for His glory and for our uh, prosperity and happiness. If I burn down the forest I live in, it will no longer produce trees for me, or even the thimbleberries that we feed to the goats. Uh, so it would be crazy to destroy the earth. At the same time, we should not destroy mankind in order to somehow salvage the earth. We're given authority over that. Okay, cattle and over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, like ants, for example. We put out poison the other day to keep the ants from coming into the house. And if it kills a few of them, that's the cost of doing business. And all of us who deal with the occasional creeping things, especially uh, those of you who have spent significant time in the Philippines, you know what I'm talking about. Uh, Sometimes you just have to make them go away. Sometimes you can live with them, like the little lizards that live on the wall. But others you just as soon not have to put up with. And so, verse 27, we see that God actually did this. Oh, so 26, let's do this. The optative, let us do this. And verse 27 is the indicative mode. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So male and female are the two poles of mankind. And I think it would be fair to say, based on this verse alone, that the image of God is incomplete in either male or female alone. God designed us as a human race to be male and female, and to pair off and reproduce. He designed us specifically as a basic part of our nature to form families. That's God's main thing. So here in the essence of the creation of man is the foundational point of the existence of man himself, which is the production of a family. Adam and Eve were going to be given the commission to be fruitful and fill the earth. Uh, that's where it's going. Okay. Uh, and God blessed them. This is verse 28. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it." Okay, that last part is sometimes controversial amongst the modern popular um, theories of existence. If we assume there is no God and the earth is the greatest of all beings, then man subduing the earth is kind of an awful thing. That a man would actually go out in the woods with a chainsaw and cut down trees in order to build houses is just terrible, and we ought to prohibit that or tax it out of existence or whatever. That a man would go out into the wilderness and drill holes and take oil out of the earth in order to run our vehicles and airplanes and to provide lubrication and make plastic and whatnot, medicines. That's a terrible thing. We should leave it in the earth. I'm I'm one of those people who believes that the modern environmentalist is a little crazy. That's just my. I know there are probably nicer ways to say that, but I can't think of any offhand. I think the modern environmentalist is a little crazy. It has a pathological hatred for mankind himself, and obviously for God, who created man. So God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Okay, it's a fairly straightforward thing. Man is the steward over all the earth, and as man um, is fruitful and fills the earth, that stewardship extends over all the earth. And where it is difficult to subdue the earth, it takes a little longer. And that's in the nature of things. Uh, um, uh, Roughly 200 years ago, there was a scientist by the name of Malthus who invented the Malthusian theory. Said that sooner or later there will be too many people, they'll eat all of the food, and then everyone will starve. And so there is a natural upper limit to human population on the earth. That was back in the days when human population was well under a billion people. We're somewhere around 8 billion today. And the problem in most places is not that people cannot produce enough food, but that they will not for one reason or another. Government interventions are a part of it. A lack of knowledge of how to efficiently do the work, an unwillingness to attempt new things. There's lots of problems, but there's no lack of resources in the earth to handle all of the population that fruitful men and women can produce. It's and we've got plenty of room. We're just And there's some places where there are too many of us all at one time. Maybe we need to spread out a bit more. Uh, and verse 29, uh, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that's on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you. Okay, think about that for a second. The plants and uh, and other fruits that have seeds in them are technically what we would call fruit. Now, some of the fruits that Adam and Eve could eat in the garden were not fruit in the sense of a mango or an apple, uh, what we think of as sweet stuff. Uh, some were closer to what we would think of as vegetables. Tomatoes, for example, go better in a salad than they do just eating them raw. Nevertheless, the initial diet of mankind, of Adam and Eve in that garden, consisted of fruits, mostly from trees and from bushes. They didn't kill animals to eat them, and they didn't eat the roots or stems of the plants. They ate the fruits of the plants. Uh, when when sin entered the world, the vegetables, the stems and roots of plants, were added to the diet. They were still essentially vegetarian, but the uh, alimentary tract, the digestive system of mankind, underwent some kind of a supernatural change. A, fundamental changes happen. Today, if I eat nothing but fruit for a couple of days, as I sometimes do in the middle of the summer when the fruit is so plentiful, uh, I pay for it. You all know how that happens. My digestive system isn't designed for that. I need some vegetables to go with the fruit, and I need some protein one way or another, whether that protein is meat or eggs or beans or whatever. I need some protein to go with it. By the end of chapter 3, Adam has added vegetables to his uh, to his diet. The meat is not added until chapter 9, after the flood. So there's this progression, and it requires a physical change in man's digestive system so that he can actually handle different kinds of food. Uh, it's, it's a fascinating thing, something we're not going to do a huge amount with. Just going to look at that. So um, God said, I've given you every plant, every beast of the field, the bird, everything that moves and has life on the earth. I've given every green plant for food. In other words, animals didn't eat each other. And God saw all that he'd made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So on that sixth day, all of the land animals are created, and then man is created in the midst of it to be the image of God. And specifically, man is male and female. Now, we're also going to find that all of the other animals, and for that matter, plants, have a maleness and femaleness. There's a duality or a binary nature to creation, creation itself. The maleness and femaleness are fundamental. This is not a social contract. We don't get a gender assigned at birth. Maleness and femaleness are determined at conception, whether you've got a pair of X chromosomes or an X and a Y. Means you're either male or female as a single cell. Uh, it, uh, it doesn't get any more basic than that. There are not 67 genders in the womb. There's only the one. You've got a choice of two. The one that you're conceived with is the one that you hold on to throughout all of your life, no matter what kind of mutilations these people inflict on one another. Uh, the genetic code itself is unchangeable and extends to every cell. Uh, as a guy, I'm very happy to be married to a woman. And I have long noticed that my wife and I are different in all kinds of things. Obviously our bodies are different shapes. She's built in such a way that she's very good at having babies. Men are built in such a way that they're not very good at having babies, but they're pretty good at going out and digging ditches. And the two different body styles are fundamental. That's basic. That comes with the genetic makeup of the cells that we're made up of. I can't, as a man, decide tomorrow morning that I'm going to be a woman for a while. I, that is, in fact, the definition of insanity. It's just a really silly thing to think I can do. Men and women are really so different. Women have a way of interacting vertically. To see the ladies of our Tuesday night Bible study praying together and sharing and listening to God and interacting with one another, it's a whole different thing than uh, I do with a group of men that meets downstairs. We get down there and we argue and we talk politics and we study the Bible and try to hammer out, theological stuff that we could all agree on. We're just different. We are simply different. That's why we have a women's Bible study upstairs and the men go down in the basement because we're different. We drink coffee and the girls drink tea. The women talk about their kids and their grandkids, and the men talk about politics and war in the Middle East. And that's okay. I don't think men should be more feminine. And I really don't think that women should be more masculine. I think it's good the way it is. God had some good ideas, and it would be best if we just stayed there. Okay, so God saw all that He had made, and behold, does the Bible say He made a whole bunch of mistakes, and He just didn't like it, so He decided to go back and start? No, it doesn't. It was very good, and He closed out the sixth day and went on to yet another day, which what we're going to call this seventh day. Well, it turns out the seventh day is Shabbat, Sabbath. Uh, it's not the word that's used here, but this is the institution of the rest day. Genesis 2, first three verses. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their host. Okay? So that's a summary statement. It actually fits better at the end of chapter 1 than at the beginning of chapter 2, but they didn't ask me when they put chapter numbers in the Bible. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their host. By the seventh day, as the seventh day was dawning and God woke up from his big comfortable bed and got started on his day's work, God had completed his work which he had done. So it was all done. And he rested on the seventh day, got in his big, comfortable, easy chair in the living room and watched a football game or something, right? He took the day off. Now, that's a funny thing to think about because God doesn't God doesn't get tired. He never runs out of energy. Did God need a rest? Well, no, he really did. He wasn't tired. God rested as a model for us, a pattern. The man wasn't made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man. You notice God created the whole rest of the earth. The earth was made for man, not man for the earth. Okay? God didn't make man so that he could serve the earth. The earth was there for man to subdue and to make productive. The Sabbath is the same way. The order of creation here matters. So the 6 days of work happened, and man made at the climax of the creation week is very good. God completed his work. He concludes that this is really good. Okay, this is really good. It was as good as it gets in verse 31. Mazel tov. That's actually Yiddish, but it comes from the Hebrew, uh, uh, which is very similar. It sounds like Mazel tov. It is very good, as good as it gets. He could not have done a better job. He looks back and he evaluates what he's done. Yeah, this is good. No, that's kind of an important thing. Later on, the beginning of chapter 3, we're going to see that Satan has already, by that time, fallen. At the end of chapter 1, Satan has not fallen yet. So, what have we got in chapter 2? Well, in chapter 2, we're going to see a reiteration, a second telling of the creation of man. It's a telling in a different style, and very significantly with a different name for God, God's personal, interactive name rather than his imperial name. Instead of calling him God, we're going to give him the personal name Yahweh, which we translate Lord or Adonai in Hebrew, uh, and it makes a difference because the word Lord or Yahweh uh, is God's interactive, his personal, his uh, private name known only to those who actually know him. He's not the boss. He's Yahweh. He's a friend, and we know his name. Uh, so chapters 1 and chapter 2 are really similar. Chapter 2 reiterates the sixth day of creation, and particularly the creation of man. Uh, and this interlude here concludes it and says this is very good. By the beginning of chapter 3, which could come as quickly as a few days or as far away as several weeks or even years, we don't know. Sometime in there, Satan had to have fallen. It's after chapter 2, obviously, but before chapter 3. So the heavens and the earth were completed, and the seventh day God completed his work, and he rested from the work which he had done, even though he didn't need to rest. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. To sanctify a thing, from the Hebrew kadosh, to set it apart. Okay, he blessed the seventh day. A blessing is a good word. God created the Sabbath as a gift and a blessing for man. And I really want you to understand this. The Sabbath was not created as a religious obligation. Some people think that God commands us to rest on the Sabbath day, therefore we do absolutely nothing. We sit completely still and think about nothing because it is the Sabbath and we're required, we are obligated. That's not the spirit of this blessing. God has given us something really rather unique. And as the Sabbath day unfolds in the rest of the Old Testament, we see that it is designed as an object lesson. In the Ten Commandments, the Sabbath day is referred to uh, as in 6 days God did all his work. So on the seventh day God rested. Therefore you should do all of your work over 6 days of the work week and rest a seventh part of that week on the seventh day. Uh, you should have some time off. To do what? Well, what if you want to go skydiving? That's fairly strenuous. I believe if you don't usually work as a skydiver and you want to go skydiving and jump out of a perfectly nice airplane, that's maybe that's relaxing for you. Uh, I enjoyed flying when I was still flying, and I liked that, and I would do that on my day off uh, if I wanted to. To rest doesn't mean to do nothing. It means to relax from your usual work. Now, why should you do that? Over in Exodus, we see the implementation of manna. Uh, well, Exodus and Numbers, we see the manna from heaven, the food that comes down from heaven during the wilderness wanderings. 6 days every week, the manna would come down from heaven, and every morning the people of Israel were to go out and gather up the manna, and they were to gather enough for a day and bring it home, and they could cook it up, and they could grind it, they could make bread out of it, they could do whatever they wanted with it. If they took more than enough for the day, what was too much would simply rot, and it wouldn't be good the next day. They had to go out every day and essentially pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." Today, Father, we trust you for the manna, which will be enough for today. On the sixth day, twice as much fell, and the people were allowed to gather twice as much. On the seventh day, no manna would fall, and the manna that had been gathered on Friday would last all day Saturday, so the people could rest on Saturday. What's the point? Uh, God is making the point that if you work diligently during the 6 days of your week, you can trust me to provide the sustenance you need for the seventh day. That's what the manna is signifying. The Sabbath was meant to be an object lesson of faith. It becomes the Sabbath day for Israel later on. And there are Sabbath laws of all sorts that are become a part of Israel's uh, basic statutes. But the fundamental issue behind Sabbath is uh, the idea of faith, of trusting in the work of God. God has completed his work, and we can trust him. The Sabbath then is uh, the first intimation that ultimately for life and for salvation itself, we need to trust the completed work of God. He's the one who does the work. We can rest in the completed work of God. The book of Hebrews speaks of there still being a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Woe to him who misses out on the Sabbath rest of God. What's he talking about? That rest in the completed work of God in Christ. We have a better high priest who has gone into the Holy of Holies and planted his anchor in a place that can never be moved. We are able to rely on the completed work of Christ himself and to rest from our own work. That's what the Sabbath is ultimately about. And those who limit the Sabbath to yet another religious obligation, something I have to do, something miserable that I'm forced to do even though I don't want to, are missing the whole point of the Sabbath. Uh, when uh, uh, when I'm in Israel, sometimes Sometimes the Israelis, modern Israelis, can be so nasty about the Sabbath, especially the Orthodox. They will throw rocks at you if you come into the wrong neighborhood. They get angry at you if you drive on Saturday, and they're missing the point. Uh, there should be some sense of blessing, some sense of happiness, knowing that God has done the work, and we don't have to. Shall we then rest on the seventh day? I think it's a bit more relaxed. Jesus had his guys uh, grinding a little grain in the grain fields on their way walking through, and the Pharisees were all upset. And Jesus said, "Don't you know that man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man? The Sabbath is meant as a blessing for us and as an object lesson of our faith in Christ. The Pharisees, by definition, missed all of that. So that's that one. And God blessed the seventh day, sanctified it because he rested. Then verse 4 summarizes all of it and looks forward into the next passage. 2:4 is the first place where the term toledot is used. Ela toledot hashemayim va'et haaretz, in the day of their Bereshit, their creation. So this is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heaven. Now, that verse 4 is actually the introduction to the next several chapters. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 are together. We're going to get another Toledot passage after that. 2, 3, 4 were probably the work, may not have been written, but are probably the work of Adam and Eve. One of them, maybe somebody wrote it down. We don't believe there was an alphabet before the second millennium BC during the Hebrew exile in Egypt. But there may have been a way to write. We're simply not told. Before the flood, there was a great deal of time for people to learn how to write, but we don't have evidence one way or another for that. But that passage seems to bear the image of Adam. He was there. He was the patriarch of that period, and we see his hand in that. The first chapter probably also is the work of Adam. It uh, may have been given to him by God. This may be a story that God told to Adam so that he would have it. But all of this that we've gone through so far has to have been handed down by Adam eventually through to Noah, who took it on the ark with him and carried it on into the post-flood world. So there's some cool stuff here, and it's kind of neat. We're going to stop here, I think. Let me show you the lead slide for the next bit. Is as we get into chapter 2, come on, do it. There it is. A man of clay to show grace and mercy. That's it. I kind of like that line. That's a chapter heading from one of my Genesis commentaries back in the day. A man out of clay. So God is going to create Adam out of the dirt, literally, dust of the earth. And I like to think of Adam, whose name, by the way, Adama, means soil or dirt. It's literally, Adam's name means dirt boy. So, and every little boy I've ever known, and quite the number of little girls that I've known, love to go out and get dirty. They love to play in the mud. And if they can find some clay, they like that even better. My goodness, they can get filthy. So here's Adam, and God names him Dirt Boy because you're taken up out of the earth. Now, it's interesting that man is not created out of nothing. Right? Man is created out of the elements that are present in the earth. And the purpose of this very humble beginning, is to produce a creature to whom God could show grace and mercy. Grace and mercy are the two flip sides of love, the two sides of the coin. Grace on one side is the positive resources that God provides that we could never provide for ourselves. Mercy is the withholding of judgment that we richly deserve. Now, that hasn't happened yet. God knew that it would. So, man is created as this vessel for the reception of the grace of God and the mercy of God. This second account of creation is very specifically about the creation of man. And it's much more personal, it's much more interactive. We see a narrative style that is much more fluent. It flows rather than jerks along through 6 days and then a seventh with equal space given to everything. The first chapter is somewhat formal, but the second chapter is more like a romance. It's a story that unfolds with motifs showing why everything must happen next. Uh, these two chapters are uh, complementary. They build one another up, and they help. The one helps us understand the other, and vice versa. These are not two different um, two different Bibles, two different gods, two different stories that were put together in a clumsy way. This is very deliberate. Uh, and yet at the same time, we have to recognize that these are different accounts, and each one goes to add its own elements to the created storyline. So that's where we're going to go next week. We're going to launch directly into this story of the creation of man, the creation of woman, which is fascinating, and then the foundations of this life in the garden as it leads up to the fall. Another very important event, and we'll get all the way through chapter 2 next week, and probably I like to think we can cover more than we really can. But I'd love to get on into chapter 3. 2, 3, and 4 really go together, and I'll show you how that works as we get into it next week. All right, everybody, thank you. I appreciate everybody coming. Look at this, we've got a whole crowd here. Okay, I'm going to unmute, and let me see if I can make this thing go away. There it is. Now I can see everybody. Okay, hi guys. And we got everybody here.
Hi,
We
Dr.
got
John.
Oscar and Sally in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Good to see you guys. And there's oh yeah, we got you in a couple of spots here. And there's Christy is still there, and Roger, good. Sheila, June, Fregosa, Dante. Okay, very good, everybody. We'll see you next week. Love you all. I think we will eventually get done with Genesis, but I'm in no hurry. I love this book, and we'll come back and hit it some more next week. God bless everybody. We'll see you then.
Goodbye.
Bye bye. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.